to go through exactly what I went through. If you can tell, I am originally from here, but I didn't grow up here. You can kind of tell from my accent. I grew up down in Kentucky, and a little bit of my background, my church background, I had a lady who was like my surrogate grandmother, and she packed me to church, and she wanted to honor my mother and my father, who didn't always get to church. So she would take me to her church a couple of Sundays, and then she would head over to my mom and dad's church. And so I'll keep the denominations kind of secret so I don't offend anybody's previous background. But at her church, it was pretty much a fire and brimstone kind of church, and they preached that way, and then probably one Sunday a month you got service on tithing, whether you needed it or not. And then the other church was sort of the frozen chosen. You know, we did a lot of standing up and sitting down, and I always enjoyed the responsive reading because that way I knew everybody was awake. But when I was 6 years old, I walked the aisle of the Hellfire and Brimstone Church and was promptly patted on the head and told that I needed to go back and sit down because I was too young to understand. Even though the minister came and he talked to me, and he couldn't stump me about what the Roman road was, and he couldn't shake what I thought salvation was. He just insisted that I was too young. I think maybe that the baptistry maybe was just too deep, and I probably couldn't reach the bottom of the problem. But a little bit later on, when I was 11, I went through classes, and then I was baptized at 11. But I really didn't know much about God's grace at that point. Romans 11:6 said, "And since it's through God's kindness, then it is not by their good works, for in that case, God's grace would not be what it really is, free and undeserved." I knew about God's mercy. I knew that He had saved me from hell. But I didn't understand fully His grace. I didn't understand that there was more than that. That would have been enough, but I thought now that I had to be good. I had to earn my place. And Romans 4:4 says, "When people work, their wages are not a gift, but something that they have earned." Also, I kind of identify with Pastor Dan in the father figure. My father was hard to please, to put it mildly. It seemed that I was never quite good enough. So with God as a picture of a father figure, I had a father figure that I had to work to try to earn His love. And that was kind of my picture of God at that point too, that I needed to be good in order for Him to love me. My dad had certain expectations of me that I just didn't match up to. I wasn't thin. I wasn't the pretty little girl. And I tried hard to be because I thought that would make Him proud. I thought that would make Him happy. But it just never quite worked out that way. I did, though, find out that He bragged to people about the fact that I was smart. So I thought that was my key. I thought that was where that I could earn His love. So I worked really hard at being smart. I remember one time I had gotten a C in spelling, and you would have thought the world had come to an end. That was just not acceptable in my household. So the next 9 weeks I worked really hard. I thought, okay, that can't happen again because that was almost the tipping edge there. So I was so proud. I came home with that report card and I showed my mom, and she was very proud, but I told her I wanted to show Daddy. I didn't want her to show me. I had gotten all A's, including the class that I got a C in, and only 2 of them were plain A's. The rest were A pluses. And in one class, I had done so much extra credit work that I had 112 average. And the teacher didn't know what to do with 112 average, so she gave me an A++. I don't know that that's been done since, but so I was just ecstatic. I knew this was my key. I knew that my dad would then tell me how much he loved me and how proud he was of me. And I remember him looking at the grade card, and he stared at it for a long time, and then he looked up and he said, "Well, why aren't these other 2 A+?" It broke my heart, because I realized at that point that I could not live up to his expectations. Now later on he told my mom that he was only kidding, And maybe that was true, but in my heart, it wasn't. And I knew at that point that I wasn't going to live up to his expectations. And so I still tried to get my validation from him and from others. And so I looked at myself as a reflection of how others saw me, not how God saw me. And so what I saw was almost like a distorted funhouse mirror. When you look through others' eyes, you get their perspective. And I didn't realize that I didn't need to look to them for validation, but I needed to look to God. What I should have been looking at is Galatians 1:10. Obviously, I'm not trying to win the approval of other people, but God. If pleasing people were my goal, I would not be Christ's servant. Well, I was the biggest people pleaser that there was. It didn't matter what I wanted. I wanted other people to be happy. And that was kind of my pattern for life. I wish that I had fully understood Psalm 139:14. And I still struggle with this one a little bit. I still have to work on it. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. I wish that I had seen myself as the wonderful creation that God had made me, instead of looking to others to validate the fact that I was a wonderful creation. But I could not. So I still struggled to be the people pleaser. I was still struggling to be the smart girl, because that's what I thought I had going for me. That's the only thing I thought I had going for me. So I made it to a program where I could go to college. So when I started college that fall, I already had 3 college courses and had some of my basics out of the way. So I was going into pre-med, which that was the only course that was set before me, because that was going to be the only thing that was going to be good enough. My father was a veterinarian, so the only way for me to live up to his expectations is to be at least a veterinarian or a doctor. So, being that I was on the fast track, I took organic chemistry my very first semester at school. That was a mistake. I should have known it was a mistake when I took my first test and graded on the curve. I made a 52, and that was a B. This professor was writing his book, and so in the first 2 weeks he caught us up to the half where he was working on his book. So we were all completely lost. Now, drop adding the class would have been the best thing to do, but that would have put me behind on my schedule, so I could not do that. Well, as the semester approached, the end of the semester approached, it was obvious that I was going to get a C in the course. And if you know anything about med school, if you have a C on your transcript, you cannot get in. Now, I could have retaken the class, but that also would have put me behind. And I thought, this is the end. My philosophy was, if I could be all that was thought to be expected of me, I was nothing. And I thought there was no hope. So I decided to take my own life. Well, I had tried some pills and that did not work. So I proceeded, while my roommate was away at college, to get into my car and drive it into a telephone pole. And I made a pretty big mess of my car and a telephone pole and myself at the same time. It had thrown me into the back seat of the car because, as you well know, you're trying to kill yourself in a car if you do not put on a seatbelt. If I had put on my seatbelt, I probably would have been successful. But as I had not, it threw me into the back seat of my car. And I was awake through the entire ordeal. And laying mangled in the back seat of my car, I cried out to God and I said, God, please take me home. I do not want to be here anymore. I do not want to hurt like this anymore. And he spoke to me and he said, not yet. It's not your time. I still have things for you to do. I was heartbroken again. I was like, oh, I can't do this. And I thought, well, Yes, I've got to. So I started kind of assessing myself in the back seat of the car before they cut me out. And the front of the car was so mangled that when someone tried to talk to me through the window, they kept saying, "Honey, who was driving?" And I said, "I was." And they thought that I had hit my head because I was in the back seat. The front of the car was so crushed they could not tell that there was not somebody in the driver's seat. So they cut me out of the car, and when they got me to the hospital, they had told my family that they weren't sure that I was going to live. I already knew I was because I had word that I was. But I had a multitude of injuries. I had broken both arms. I almost lost my thumb. I had broken 6 ribs, punctured a lung, and bruised my heart. I broke my right femur, my right knee, and both legs right above the ankles, and all the bones in both of my feet. Now, after I was, quote unquote, out of the woods, according to the doctors, and had been moved to a regular room, I remember the doctor coming in and talking to me about the possibility of me not walking again and how it would be difficult, especially since I was overweight, to learn how to walk again. And almost as an afterthought, as he was walking out of the room, he said, "But you know, being overweight is what saved your life." And I couldn't believe that. The bane of my existence to this point had been the fact that I was fat. And it had saved my life. So God had a plan. Because he said, if you had been thin, that rib that bruised your heart would have punctured it and you would have died instantly. So God had a better plan than I did when it came to my weight, even though I didn't really understand that. Now, if this were a perfect story, then I would have gone on and I would have gotten my revelation and I would have gone and done great things for the Lord. But this isn't a perfect story. I didn't get it still. I did not understand. I wanted to know why he saved me and what I had to do, but I still didn't understand God's grace. I didn't know that he had a plan for my life. See, Psalms 139 says, "You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book, and every moment was laid out before a single day had passed." But I wanted to know what it was. But I didn't, and I still didn't understand all of God's grace. I knew that he saved me from this, and he had a plan for me, but I still thought that I was doing it on my own. It wasn't an instant revelation. I still had to work through those old tapes in my head. I still had to work through, "You're not good enough." I still thought that I had to earn people's love. I ended up with a second suicide attempt. I had gotten involved with a person, and I loved them dearly, but I was trying to earn their love. And love is a gift. You don't earn it. And no matter how hard I tried, I could not. And so when he left me, I thought once again I had become a failure. I did not know that we are God's masterpiece, and he has created us anew in Jesus Christ so that we can do the good things that he planned for us long ago. I still didn't get that. This suicide attempt